that's going to rock your world. Give it up for Gabrielle Smith.
All right. Quarantine, stay-at-home order, shelter in place. What a time to be alive. Everybody had some kind of reaction when you heard that word. I don't care who you are, whether you are me and the extrovert of all extroverts, or you did a little party in your head when you heard you got to stay home and you're the introvert. Everybody at this point is wondering, when will this end? Quarantine, stay at home, shelter in place, it stirs up all kinds of crazy emotions. And I think for the most part, they're negative. I don't know one person who was like, thank you for telling me to stay in my home and only leave if I have to. It's my dream for you to tell me what to do. I don't think anyone out there was like, yes, I love to be told when I can do it and where. It's scary. It's scary for so many reasons. If you are me, a huge extrovert, it's scary because you're pushed in your house for months on end, not allowed to leave, and you're alone. Very, very alone. And if you are not like me and you prefer to be alone, it's still scary because you're in your house and you're alone. And it's scary because the world outside is nuts. There's a pandemic going on, and yes, measures needed to be taken. The shelves aren't stocked with anything. You can't go to the doctor. Surgeries have been canceled. What's next? And we're all wondering, when will it end? But it's not just scary for those few reasons. It's not scary because you were left at home alone. I'd like to counter and say you were actually not alone at all. You were left alone with yourself. And no one likes to be left alone with themselves. For many of us, this quarantine was a time to reflect or force ourselves to meet ourselves yet again. And one of two things happened during this time. You either fell in love with yourself again, or you fell in loathing with yourself again. Ouch, I know it's hard, but majority of us really fell in loathing. But even if we fell in love with ourselves, love or loathing, we all realized something has to change. If we were in love with ourselves, we reflected, we looked on our life and we said, our schedules are too busy, we've cluttered our lives, this needs to go, and I needed to make more time for me, for my family, for my significant other, for time with the Father. Something has to change. And if we found ourselves staring in the mirror, hating what we saw, we were thinking, oh, something has to give. Something has to change. But I'm sad to say that for the majority of us who really didn't like what we saw, we did not feel that glimmer of hope that something could change. In fact, we felt adversely different. We felt that nothing would ever change. In fact, the statistics on the mental health decline in the United States at this very moment, after this quarantine, proves that people feel as if nothing could change. We've looked at ourselves and we felt complete hopelessness, despair, anguish, and went, I will never change. We feel this way because whether it's in love or loathing, we feel how we feel about quarantine because the things that cluttered our schedule, the things that kept us busy, kept us moving, work, friends, social groups, parties, addictions, no matter what type, church, serving, were really just things that covered up who we really were. And I am in no way saying that God, I just want to be very clear, God did not create this. God didn't make it. This is not his judgment on mankind, sending out plagues on modern day Egypt. This is not God's wrath. It was not his will that man experienced this. But I do think that God saw an opportunity for his glory to be made known. And how is God's glory best shown? In humanity. Well, as Stephen just said, the kingdom is you. It's here. And if his glory is best shown through me, what stops his glory from being shown? But a mask, literally right now because we're wearing them everywhere, but a mask or a veil. And what we did with our lives, I believe God looked down and he saw a nation, a world of Christians, of believers, masking, veiling who they really were. His glorious image. I think that he saw a nation walking around, busying their schedule, building up not an image of God, but an image of themselves in their mind, based off what they thought it should look like. They cluttered their lives with work and hobbies and habits, social groups, parties, friends, relationships, how we handled relationships. Again, addictions, no matter what it is, to drugs, alcohol, sex, or food. Been there, done that. Church, yes, church. And how you serve in the church was merely a mask for you. We stepped into a church not because we wanted to come to bring something to the Father, but we were hoping that just by merely being here, it would change us. We stepped into a church and out of obligation served, not from joy, not from our calling, not because God created us to do what we do, but because obligation. And let's get this clear, not obligation to the Father because we love him, obligation to ourselves to be better. Obligation to cover up and hide and mask what we hate about ourselves. Obligation that others could hopefully maybe see that we're different, we're better, we're unique. And we got home and we got alone for 3 months. And we stared in a mirror, a reflection of who we thought we were, an image we had made to ourselves, and we hated it. Because all those things, all those veils and masks that covered up what we thought we hated was moved, and we see an image and we don't like what we see. Because all the things that were broken about us, because we're born into a broken world, never healed. What we did is we slapped a Band-Aid on a cut and said, get better, instead of applying what's needed for it to be healed. We rubbed some makeup on a pimple in hopes no one else would see it, but we never did what we needed to do to clean our face. And so our brokenness, our anger, our anguish, our despair, our disappointments, our regrets, nothing was ever fixed. We just created an image of what we thought God wanted, instead of walking to God and saying, God, what do you want? And we didn't turn into his glorious image. We turned into our abhorring, horrible, nasty image. And for those of you who were feeling nothing will ever change, I have been there. I have been in that pit. I have felt what you're feeling. And I'm here to tell you, you're right. Nothing's going to change. You will never break your addictions. You'll never quit your bad habits. You can never change yourself. You can never, ever stop doing what you're doing without the Father. Because when you tried to quit doing what you were doing in the first place on your own, you got to where you are now. It becomes a cycle of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result just doesn't happen. But when we take the veil off, we remove the mask, and we place our hand in the Father's hand and say, what do you want to fix? Then things change. Because God's not in the changing you business. God's in the bringing you to the surface business. Because when God created you, he made no mistake. He formed you in your mother's womb. He said that he works all things together for the good of those who love and serve him. And he, from beginning to the end, made you how you are supposed to be. But we are born into brokenness, into free will, into sin. And so when we are born, automatically the process of bringing who you were made to be to the surface begins with the Father. We sadly fight him all the way. We want control because you're trying to change me, and he's like, I'm not. I'm trying to keep you how you were. My image. Who I am. I created you in my image. You're changing it. And when we put our hand in the Father's hand, it's like a bright light coming on. When you're trying to fix it on your own, it's like sitting in a pitch black room, unable to see, trying to screw screws into the right hole. It's never going to happen. And you may get some form of something together, but it's going to break or fall apart eventually because you don't know what you're doing. But when God steps in, things have to change. He cannot be present and things stay the same. It's why when you come into his presence, you start to feel different, sometimes uncomfortable, a little uneasy, because when he's here, the things that don't belong to him have to go. And when he steps into the room, the brightest light comes on. And we take our mask off. And he says, okay, let's clean you up. 2 Corinthians chapter 3 is one of my favorite chapters of the Bible. From the moment I read it, the day I gave my heart to the Father, to this day, it speaks volumes to me. It is so powerful. And if you have a chance to go home and read it today, I want to encourage you to go home and read 2 Corinthians chapter 3. And it starts off with Paul saying, are we commending ourselves yet again? Patting ourselves on the back for a good job well done? He continues to go on talking about how that's not how we're supposed to do things. The work never stops. He talks about the fact that the glory of the Lord used to rest inside of a tabernacle behind a veil, but that when the Lord, the Father, sacrificed his Son, that the veil was split in two, and his presence, his glory, his image was released into humanity, into you. And now, instead of having to visit his presence, it rests and reflects and shines inside of us. He talks about the fact that it takes work, and he's continuously, every day, making us into his image, but that when we remove the veil, things change. And the last verse of the chapter, 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 18 says, so we who have removed the veil can see and reflect his glorious image. And the Lord, who is the Spirit, continues to make us more and more like him into his glorious image. So what if? What if during this time that seems like chaos, we decided to look for the goodness woven inside of our lives? We decided to take the mask off, to remove the veil, and to allow God to do his work in us. What if instead of coming to church to get, we came to give? What if instead of coming to serve because we think we have to, we found the joy in what God called us to, and we did it because it's who he made us to be? And let's just start here, because we can't expect the world to do what we're not doing. So what if, River Church, we took off our veil? What if we did the work with the Father to be made into his glorious image? We placed our hand in his hand and said, "Here I am, make me a vessel." So that we who remove the veil can see and reflect the glory of the Lord. And the Lord, who is the Spirit, will continue to make us more and more like him into his glorious image. Thank you.